Welcome to The Explainer. So glad you're here today because we're diving straight into a topic that is literally reshaping modern football. We're going to unpack the incredibly complex, often dizzying financial ecosystem of the Premier League. If you've ever wondered how certain clubs seem to just have bottomless wallets while others are scrambling to keep their heads above water, you are in the exact right place. $2.92 billion. Yeah, you heard that right. That is the staggering gross transfer spend committed by Premier League clubs in the 2026 summer window alone. It's a completely astronomical figure, and it just proves that football's transfer market has fully evolved into an industry of enormous numbers. But how in the world is this sustainable? And who is actually making the rules? So here's how we're going to break this all down today. First, we'll look at the 2026 transfer boom. Second, PSR punishments and loopholes. Third, entering the SCR era. Fourth, we'll explain multi-club ownerships. And finally, the future of football finances. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the 2026 transfer boom. There's just this absolutely wild disparity in the market right now. Take Chelsea, for example, sitting way up at the top, spending over $240 million more than they brought in. But then, look down at the other end. Clubs like Newcastle and Nottingham Forest are pulling in massive net profits by cautiously selling off talent. It's a tale of two entirely different strategies operating within the exact same league. So what's actually driving these insane numbers? Well, it's fees like £117 million for Morgan Rogers, $116 million for Elliot Anderson, and $92.5 million for Sandro Tonali. Think about it. There was a time when a £100 million transfer was a completely once-in-a-generation event for a global superstar, right? Now, it's basically the going rate for versatile midfielders just moving between domestic rivals. The Premier League has essentially created its own highly inflated closed economy. Moving right along to Section 2, PSR, punishments and loopholes. Under the old Profitability and Sustainability Rules, or PSR, Everton and Nottingham Forest were hit with a combined 12-point deduction. That literally dropped them into real-time relegation fights for their financial breaches. Meanwhile, Chelsea ran a £47.5 million shadow payment system over 7 years under previous ownership, and their punishment? A £10.75 million fine. No points deducted at all, no sporting sanctions. You can probably guess that this inconsistency sparked a ton of frustration. Former Everton manager David Moyes pretty much hit the nail on the head when he asked, what would you rather have, a £10 million fine or a 10-point deduction? How much is the £10 million fine having an effect really? It perfectly captures that illusion of fairness that left so many fans and clubs deeply, deeply dismayed. Which brings us to a massive question. How exactly do clubs hide these astronomical costs while still spending hundreds of millions every single summer? Well, let's peel back the curtain on the accounting gymnastics happening in the boardroom. It all really comes down to loopholes. Under the old system, clubs loved using amortization. That basically means giving players these massive 7 to 9 year contracts just to artificially spread out and lower the annual cost on their balance sheets. They'd also do asset sales. I'm talking literally selling stadiums, hotels, or women's teams to sister companies controlled by the exact same owners just to count it as revenue. And then, of course, those shadow payments, concealing wages or fees completely off the official books. That brings us to Section 3, entering the SCR era. Okay, so SCR stands for Squad Cost Ratio. Instead of the old system that looked backward at cumulative cash losses over 3 years, SCR is a brand new, real-time rule. It strictly caps a club's squad-related spending to a very specific percentage of the total revenue they bring in. The absolutely crucial rule here is that a club cannot spend more than 85% of its total revenue on its squad. If they stay under that 85% mark, they're totally fine. But if they creep above it into that remaining 15% buffer, they're going to face sliding financial levies and eventually hard point deductions. So what exactly eats up that 85% slice of the pie? We're talking player wages, the head coach's salary, agent fees, and those amortized transfer fees we just talked about. But interestingly, the league specifically excluded things like academy running costs and stadium operations. The idea there is to actually incentivize owners to keep investing locally in the fans and the youth pipeline. But here is where things get really interesting, because this setup exposes a massive, baked-in flaw of the SCR system. Since the cap is tied directly to revenue, the spending gap is just enormous. A top 6 club bringing in £700 million can comfortably spend £595 million on their squad. Meanwhile, a smaller club earning $150 million is capped at just $127.5 million. Basically, it guarantees that the richest clubs can always outspend the rest of the league. Now, there was actually a proposal meant to fix this huge gap. It was called anchoring, and it would have created a hard spending ceiling tied directly to the revenue of the league's bottom club. But that idea was firmly rejected. The wealthiest clubs, along with major player agencies who were threatening legal action over salary caps, successfully got the measure killed. All right, let's pivot to Section 4, Multi-Club Ownerships Explained. A really prime example of how this works is the City Football Group, or CFG. Just look at the pathway of a player like Savinho. Step 1, he gets bought by CFG for their French club, Troyes. Step 2, he's loaned out to their Spanish club, Girona, for development. And Step 3, he's transferred right to their flagship club, Manchester City in England. It's an incredibly efficient global network that just seamlessly moves talent in-house. But, that kind of corporate efficiency definitely comes with a cultural cost. Football executive Peter Ridsdale pointed this out, saying, "There is a risk that if what you're getting is an investment model, which is purely to make a profit, you lose the local identity." And fans absolutely feel that disconnect, especially when things like ticket policies are changed purely to maximize global revenue. Of course, this multi-club model isn't completely without its regulatory roadblocks. For example, UEFA rules actually force owners to reduce their stakes below 30% if multiple clubs they own qualify for the Champions League. We saw this when both Manchester City and Girona qualified, forcing the City Football Group to actively reduce their ownership to avoid conflicts of interest. So the system does kind of break a bit when multiple clubs under the exact same umbrella get too successful at the same time. Which brings us to our final part today, Section 5, the future of football finances. The era of clubs essentially policing themselves is officially ending. In July 2025, a government-backed independent football regulator was established. Fast forward to August 2026, and the Premier League's shadow monitoring for those new SCR rules officially kicks off. And you'll definitely want to circle this date, March 2027. That's when the first formal SCR compliance checks actually happen. That means real-time punishments could start hitting right in the middle of the 26-27 season. So that leaves us with one final burning question. With massive revenue gaps completely untouched and global ownership networks expanding every day, will these new rules finally level the playing field? Or, when all is said and done, has the Premier League simply rebuilt the exact same problem just with better accounting for the richest clubs? It's a truly fascinating situation to watch unfold, and one that is absolutely going to define the sport for decades. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.